Hello, everybody. This is Debo here with Debo's Movie Reviews, and today I will be reviewing How the West Was Won. Directed by Henry Hathaway, John Ford, and George Marshall in a Western anthological epic which spanned about like the 1840s to like the 1880s. Three generations of a family, first being the Prescott, then Rollins, where you got Carol Baker's character and Debbie Reynolds' characters, even Lily Prescott and their father, Zeb, played by Carl Malden, and their mother, played by Agnes Moorehead, who was best known as Endora from Bewitched. And then you got, and then there's the California Trail sequence with Gregory Peck and Robert Preston. Preston as a trail boss, and Gregory Peck was her love interest. Lily Prescott's love interest, as in David Reynolds' character, Cleve Van Valen, that is. I mean, and of course, with their Civil War and the railroad thing and that outlaw sequences you got with casting, you got Russ Tamblyn as a random Confederate soldier, and you got John Wayne in a brief sequence as General William Tecumseh Sherman, with Harry Morgan, best known for Colonel Potter from MASH, as Ulysses Simpson Grant. I mean, as the events of Battle of Shiloh for some reason. And then, of course, Richard Widmark as like the head of a railroad company, aka Mike King, with Henry Fonda as Jethro Stewart, who was like a mountain man and friend of Linus Rawlings, played by Jimmy Stewart, who in the first sequence movie was the love interest of Carol Baker, who character Eve Prescott, following their trail for the Erie Canal as the families bound for Promised Land, where Ron Rawlins was a mountain man on his way back east, but settles down with Eve following a rapid accident that killed her family, killed her brother and her parents, and of course, which like I say was an epic sequence in that one, with a lot of excellent character castings with Carl Malden and Agnes Moorehead, of course, and then you had Lee Van Cleef and Walter Brennan as River Pirates in that while they were going 15 miles on the Erie Canal. I just reminds me, when I hear that phrase, I just think of a whole running joke. That whole running joke from Rugrats, with Grandpa Lou Pickles talking about how with a 15 miles deal, which from where the movie starts off with this version starts off with like a whole overture of multiple songs. Majority of them are performed by the Springfields, which of course was the same Springfields as 60s music legend Dusty Springfield was originally a member of before she went solo. I mean, epic overture, and then there's the whole intermission sequence with songs from there, along with that "Away in the Meadow" song that was played throughout the movie, with that were Reynolds' character on a Lily on a accordion before their boat got called out, and then I mean just I mean just a full on epic that told various events of the Wild West through the as it is of a family. And I gotta say, everyone was perfectly cast for their roles, with ranging from Jimmy Stewart to George Peppard, who played Zeb Rollins in throughout half the movie. And then you got Carolyn Jones, best known as Morticia Addams, in pretty much the only other thing I can really think of her being in. While George Peppard, of course, was John Hannibal Smith, and then you got Eli Wallach, who plays Charlie Gant, Outlaw. I mean, it was one of those most iconic westerns, along with Good, Bad, and Ugly and the original Magnificent Seven. First one, that is, not counting Seven Samurai. And Lee J. Cobb of the series Virginian, that was a big hit at the time. But the whole river thing was a good sequence. Then you had the California Trail with a lot of epic scenes and castings of like Robert Preston as a trail boss, and then there's Cleve Van with, of course, David Reynolds going to California after a whole claim was left to her in a will from her days as a saloon girl. Then, and of course, with Robert Preston known for the musicals and such, they did have a musical number with Raise a Ruckus Tonight in that sequence. And then you got the Civil War, which, of course, a lot of which was a much I like learning about watching that sequence. I gotta say, it was kind of one of more flawed sequences of kind of like the scrap deal with where Jimmy Stewart's character Linus Rollins, who was a mountain man in one sequence, and then written off as dead at the Battle of Shiloh after leading a Yankee militia, Ohio Volunteers, which, of course, he had Andy Devine a member of, and gotta give it all Andy Devine, kind of like the fat version of Slim Pickens, although he came first, but they both had that distinct voice. And of course, with George Peppard, and pretty much his breakout, one of his best roles, and I'll say it's kind of my second favorite besides being Hannibal. And I gotta give it to John Wayne and Harry Morgan as their parts as Grant and Sherman. Though I gotta admit, there was a bit of a flaw with the Civil War sequences of how they didn't have a scene with Zeb and Paul talking before battle, let alone showing, instead of like him dead in the hospital, they could have shown him dying in battle. I mean, but of course, give it a sentimental time, and I admit, kind of a different point they were trying to make of it showing the horrors of war, instead of like Ford who's known more for glorifying war in their movies. And then I gotta give it the railroad sequence, which kind of, as much as I like Richard Widmark as Mike King, kind of another missed opportunity to have Zeb Rollins reunite with, actually meet his uncle Cleve, who had his own deal with the railroad. company. It was going to, going eastward, while one company was going westward, trying to meet before a deadline, and delayed by the war, of course. And of course, you got a good scenario with Henry Fonda, of course, as Jethro Stewart. I mean, practically another one of his great performances, especially when it came to westerns. And as much as I just mentioned the whole deal, and they should have had like a thing of where they just try to put Gregory Peck in older man makeup and all. Have be like their whole deal. But hey, Widmark knocked it out of the park. I mean, because he was always good at playing assholes and villains. Both, and of course then you had the whole sequence with where over 20 years later, and Zeb Rollins is a Wild West lawman. It was retiring, but had one more outlaw to put away. Therein lies Charlie Gant and his old deal. And of course, after following the passing of Cleve, who was killed off screen. Not killed off, but more like older and natural causes. And then, of course, having Lily retired to the ranch, and then, of course, meeting there, and then while Zeb had some unfinished business with his son, and then while he was about leaving a quiet life with his wife and all, and then of course had that whole epic train sequence. I mean, just the whole climactic bit of action on that one. From one Desperado finally getting theirs, and then whew, I gotta say, Eli Wallach of course, was a badass, and I gotta say, and then one other one I could say, one of the best thing, practically the best thing Lee J. Cobb's ever done, and then of course, how can you forget the excellent narration by Spencer Tracy? Like I say, though it was only like a narrating role, that's as far as I'm going to say in one of his best performances. I can't really say I've crossed any of his movies off my list yet, besides this masterpiece, of course. But of course, he was hired on as a narrator because he was supposed to hire a role, but he had supposedly had bad health. But he knocked it out of the park. Because heck, if they ever remade it with that, you know what role Morgan Freeman would have been perfect for. So overall, I gotta give this an excellent 5 out of 5. Just great sound, great music, great acting, great narration, great action. And of course, you also mention some other cat featuring scenes in there with, Raymond Massey had like a bit of a cameo as Lincoln, which they didn't really give much of a bigger part of it. And Russ Tamblyn was like the Red Soldier that Zeb kills at Shiloh, because that whole sequence was more of like a roundabout Union camp and all, not. But overall, a 5 out of 5. Enjoy, people.